Some Jedi Masters leave their mark on the galaxy through grand battles or legendary duels. Others shape history through quiet wisdom and unwavering conviction. Qui-Gon Jinn did both. Before he discovered Anakin Skywalker, before he faced a Sith Lord on Naboo, he was just a boy from Coruscant with an extraordinary connection to the Force. Born around 80 years before the Battle of Yavin, Qui-Gon Jinn entered a galaxy still enjoying a golden age of peace. The Republic stood strong, and the Jedi Order flourished as guardians of that peace. Like many Force-sensitive children, Qui-Gon was identified early and brought to the Jedi Temple, where a different kind of life awaited him. Within those ancient walls, young Qui-Gon found himself assigned to the Heliost clan. Here, alongside other younglings, he took his first steps into the larger world of the Jedi. Under the watchful eye of Master Terra Sinube, he learned the fundamental forms of lightsaber combat. These early lessons would serve as the foundation for a fighting style that would one day hold its own against the first Sith Lord seen in 1,000 years. But the path of a Jedi is about more than combat. It's about connection to the Force, about wisdom, about understanding. When Qui-Gon turned 12, the moment every youngling both dreams of and fears arrived. He was chosen as a Padawan learner by none other than Master Dooku. The night before he left the youngling's creche, Qui-Gon stayed up late with his friends, laughing and imagining the adventures that awaited them all. He practiced with his training lightsaber until Master Yaddle finally ordered him to bed. Sleep didn't come easily that night. How could it, when tomorrow would change everything? When he presented himself to his new master in Dooku's quarters, young Qui-Gon was terrified, not of Dooku himself, but of failing, of not becoming a Jedi. When Dooku pressed him to explain his fear, Qui-Gon looked inward and answered with startling honesty. This self-awareness impressed Dooku, who told his new apprentice that most Padawans would simply deny their fear, lacking the insight Qui-Gon already possessed. To help his new apprentice better understand the temple that would be his home, Dooku gave Qui-Gon a comprehensive tour. They visited the Padawan sparring dojo and watched knights train in more advanced techniques. They explored the great assembly room where Jedi gathered for important occasions. Qui-Gon found the meditation chambers interesting, if not exactly exciting, but the Arboretum captivated him with its collection of plants from thousands of worlds. Their final stop was the Jedi Archives, where something unexpected caught Qui-Gon's eye, an ancient holocron, different in shape from all the others. When he asked about it, Dooku's expression darkened. It contained Jedi prophecies, he explained, adding that such mystic knowledge often led those who studied it too deeply toward the dark side. The Jedi no longer studied prophecy for this reason. This would be Qui-Gon's first encounter with the holocron of prophecies, but far from his last. Just 4 months into his apprenticeship, Qui-Gon faced his first true test when the Council sent him and Dooku to Shurupak to participate in a battle on the planet's surface. As their shuttle approached under heavy fire, Qui-Gon tried to calm his nerves by looking to his master as an example of fearlessness. At Primus Base, he met Rael Averross, Dooku's first Padawan and a renowned lightsaber duelist. While Dooku conferred with the generals, Rael placed a friendly hand on Qui-Gon's shoulder. Instead of offering reassurance about the coming battle, Rael offered something perhaps more valuable, a connection. He told Qui-Gon that since Dooku could be difficult to know, The young Padawan could come to him with questions he might not feel comfortable asking his master. He even offered to be Qui-Gon's sparring partner. With his first battle looming, Qui-Gon gratefully accepted. In that moment, he saw Rael as a bridge between the Padawan he was and the Jedi Knight he hoped to become. The path forward suddenly seemed clearer, with someone to show the way. This relationship would prove significant when Rael later introduced Qui-Gon to the very prophecies Dooku had warned against. While working on a report in Dooku's quarters, Qui-Gon received a surprise visit from Rael. Discovering Qui-Gon struggling with a dull assignment on Theosophy, Rael grinned and offered to show him history worth studying. In the archives, they examined the prophecy holocron that had first caught Qui-Gon's attention. The young Padawan was fascinated, unable to stop reading the ancient visions. When he mentioned Dooku's warning to stay away from these teachings, Rael was confused. According to him, Dooku had once been obsessed with these prophecies and could hardly be separated from the holocron. This revelation puzzled Qui-Gon, who couldn't understand what had changed his master's mind so drastically. During his years at the temple, Qui-Gon formed meaningful connections with many fellow Jedi, from younglings to masters. He was known for helping newcomers adjust to life on Coruscant, demonstrating the compassion and helpfulness that would become hallmarks of his character. These relationships helped shape his understanding of the Force and reinforced his belief in the importance of personal connections, despite the Order's cautions against attachment. Around 58 BBY, after years of training under Dooku's guidance, Qui-Gon attained the rank of Jedi Knight. No longer an apprentice, he was now free to follow his own path within the Order. And what a unique path it would be, guided by an independent spirit and a deep connection to what he called the living Force. Little did he know that this independent streak would one day lead him to defy the Jedi Council, discover a boy with the highest midichlorian count ever recorded, and set in motion events that would reshape the galaxy forever. The journey from Jedi Knight to Jedi Master is rarely a straight path. For Qui-Gon Jinn, it was a road filled with challenges that tested not just his skills with a lightsaber, but his very understanding of what it meant to be a Jedi. In 60 years before the Battle of Yavin, the newly knighted Qui-Gon faced perhaps his most personal trial on the remote planet Felucia. Sent there on a mission, he found something he never expected: love. Against all Jedi teachings, Qui-Gon fell deeply for someone, beginning a relationship that was both romantic and physical. This wasn't just breaking a rule. It was challenging one of the core principles of Jedi philosophy. The Order strictly prohibited such attachments, believing they could lead to fear of loss and eventually to the dark side. For a time, Qui-Gon stood at a crossroads. Would he follow his heart and leave the Order behind, or would he recommit himself to the Jedi path? In the end, his loyalty to the Jedi won out, but he kept a small reminder of what might have been, a rare crystalline gemstone given to him during this relationship. For 20 years, he carried this token in a pouch on his belt, keeping it with him every day until finally passing it on to the duo Pax Marifer and Rahara Wick. This experience left its mark, helping shape his belief that the Jedi Code needed personal interpretation rather than blind obedience. But personal challenges weren't the only tests Qui-Gon would face. His partnership with his former master Dooku continued on many missions. including a dangerous assignment to capture the notorious Faline bounty hunter Shenda Mole. As part of a Numidian Prime strike team, they tracked Mole to her hideout. The mission took a dark turn when Qui-Gon was captured by the bounty hunter and faced imminent death. What happened next would plant seeds of doubt in Qui-Gon's mind about his former master. To save his ex-apprentice, Dooku unleashed Force lightning against Mole, a power typically associated with the dark side of the Force. The sight of his former master wielding such an ability deeply troubled Qui-Gon. Later, he shared his concerns with Rael Averross, but to his surprise, Rael seemed unconcerned by Dooku's actions. This incident created the first crack in Qui-Gon's perception of his mentor, a small hint that Dooku might not be the perfect embodiment of Jedi virtue he once appeared to be. These doubts would be both reinforced and challenged during a mission to rescue the son of Senator Dagonet. Upon arriving at the senator's homeworld, Qui-Gon and Dooku discovered that the alleged kidnappers were actually protesters with legitimate grievances. The senator's corruption and greed had left his own people starving while he lived in luxury. When Dagonet and his forces arrived to retrieve his son, the situation escalated rapidly. The senator threatened to burn down the entire village and many others as an example. It was then that Qui-Gon witnessed another troubling display from his former master. Enraged by the senator's callousness, Dooku began force choking Dagonet with the clear intent to kill him. Acting quickly, Qui-Gon diffused the volatile situation by releasing the senator's son, preventing further violence without bloodshed. Later, in a rare moment of humility, Dooku commended his former Padawan's actions, admitting that Qui-Gon had shown greater wisdom than himself. This experience reinforced Qui-Gon's growing belief in finding peaceful solutions and looking beyond surface appearances to the deeper truth. Not all of Qui-Gon's adventures involved life-or-death situations. When he and Dooku were invited by Council member Jor Aerith to represent the Jedi at the annual Coruscant Dragonfire Air Rally, it seemed like a simple diplomatic occasion. Their task was to make a good impression on the Kandavant ambassador. But the event took an unexpected turn when they encountered Ramil, a rally participant whom Qui-Gon was shocked to learn was Dooku's brother. As they watched the race, disaster struck when Ramil's airspeeder was sabotaged and crashed. Investigating discreetly, Qui-Gon and Dooku discovered the official investigator was actively covering up the incident. Following this lead, they traced the corruption to a Genet crime boss named Senevax. When they confronted and captured her, they learned something even more disturbing. Senevax had a spy on the Jedi Council itself. Their investigation revealed that Jedi Master Braylon had been compromised, blackmailed with the fact that she had a son named Arath Tarex, who was Dooku's old classmate. Following this revelation, Braylon was removed from the Council for her actions, and Dooku took her vacant seat, marking a significant advancement in his Jedi career. Throughout his journeys, Qui-Gon formed meaningful connections with beings from many worlds. Among his closest non-Jedi friends was the Wookiee Brennan. Their friendship spanned years and many shared adventures, with Brennan saving Qui-Gon's life on 2 separate occasions. During the second rescue, Qui-Gon felt they had saved each other, creating a bond of mutual respect and gratitude. He also came to know another Wookiee named Balfus, developing a deep appreciation for Wookiee culture that would later be evident when he brought his Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi to observe Life Day celebrations on Kashyyyk. These experiences, both challenging and enriching, helped form Qui-Gon's distinctive philosophy toward the Jedi way. Unlike many of his peers, he came to believe that following the spirit of the Jedi Code was more important than adhering to its exact letter. He famously argued that each Jedi must interpret the code for themselves, or else it would become nothing more than a prison cell, constraining their growth and understanding. This independent thinking earned him a reputation as a maverick within the Order. He prioritized following what he called the will of the Force over climbing the ranks of Jedi hierarchy, an attitude that often put him at odds with the Jedi Council. While others saw him as defiant or even rebellious, Qui-Gon saw himself as simply being true to the deeper meaning of what it meant to be a Jedi. His willingness to trust his instincts and challenge convention would eventually lead him to discoveries and decisions that would alter the course of galactic history. But long before finding Anakin Skywalker or confronting the Sith, Qui-Gon was forging his path through these formative experiences, becoming the thoughtful, independent Jedi Master who would one day be remembered as one of the most influential members of the Order. The greatest teachers aren't those who simply impart knowledge. They're the ones who challenge us, who make us question our assumptions, who sometimes frustrate us with their methods. In 44 years before the Battle of Yavin, Qui-Gon Jinn took on a young Jedi named Obi-Wan Kenobi as his Padawan learner. Neither could have known that this partnership would one day alter the fate of the galaxy. From the beginning, their relationship was complicated. Obi-Wan was studious, disciplined, and by the book. He respected the Jedi Council deeply and believed in following their directives to the letter. Qui-Gon, as we've seen, took a more independent approach. While Obi-Wan believed his master could have earned a seat on the Jedi Council if he'd just followed the rules more closely, Qui-Gon seemed entirely uninterested in such advancement. Their teaching sessions often focused on what Qui-Gon called the living force, the energy field created by all living things in the present moment. While other Jedi might meditate on the future or the past, Qui-Gon taught Obi-Wan to focus on the here and now. On one memorable occasion, the two visited a plain filled with native creatures, giving Qui-Gon the opportunity to teach his apprentice how the Force existed in all the life that surrounded them. This wasn't always easy for Obi-Wan to accept. Sometimes their different approaches created tension between them. It didn't help that Qui-Gon had an uncanny ability to sense whenever his Padawan was feeling discontent. While this proved useful during missions, it also meant Obi-Wan could rarely hide his frustrations from his master, something that occasionally annoyed the young Jedi. Their bond would be tested in 40 years before the Battle of Yavin, following a troubled mission to the planet Pijal. Upon returning to Coruscant, Qui-Gon received surprising news. The Jedi Council had extended an invitation for him to join their ranks. Master Polydipation was stepping down, and they wanted Qui-Gon to take his place. This offer shocked Qui-Gon, given his history of disagreements with the Council. While he was initially pleased by the offer, a complication quickly arose. If he accepted, he would have to pass Obi-Wan's training to another Jedi Master. Although this might have solved some of the growing problems between them, Qui-Gon felt guilty at the thought of abandoning his apprentice. Before he could share this news with Obi-Wan, however, a new crisis demanded their attention. On the inner rim world of Pijal, a political dispute had erupted. A performance troupe called the Opposition had begun with political pranks protesting a treaty signing. But their actions were growing increasingly violent as the treaty date approached. The agreement would end the absolute monarchy on Pijal, allow the world to join the Republic, and give more power to Chirka Corporation. Qui-Gon's old friend Rael Averross requested their help in resolving the situation. The timing couldn't have been worse. When Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan met with Supreme Chancellor Karamas Kaj about the mission, Obi-Wan learned about the Council offer from someone else. Qui-Gon felt deeply ashamed that he hadn't been the first to tell his Padawan. When he tried to apologize, Obi-Wan responded with uncharacteristic sarcasm, and the tension between them grew as they traveled to Pijal. Once there, they learned that Averross served as advisor to Crown Princess Fanry, who was only 14 years old and waiting to take Pijal's throne. As they investigated the opposition, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan encountered two jewel thieves, Pax Marifer and Rahara Wick. Despite Marifer's hostility toward Qui-Gon, they recruited the pair to help find the terrorists threatening the treaty. As their investigation deepened, Qui-Gon had a vision of the treaty signing turning into a bloodbath. When he met with the opposition's leader, Halin Azuka, he learned they were being framed. Though they had peacefully demonstrated against the treaty, the violent acts attributed to them were someone else's doing. Learning about the treaty's problems, particularly how it favored Chirka Corporation over the local population, Qui-Gon refused to represent the Republic at the signing. The true culprit, they discovered, was Princess Fanry herself. She had created a military group called the Blackguards and framed the opposition to restore full monarchy to Piyal. At her coronation, she rejected both the treaty and Republic influence. When she prepared to attack Chirka ships, ignoring the fact that many aboard were slaves, Qui-Gon was forced to intervene. With Obi-Wan, Marifer, and Wick's help, they managed to save the innocent people aboard. After resolving the Pijal crisis, Qui-Gon made his decision. He declined the Council's offer, choosing instead to continue Obi-Wan's training. This choice would have far-reaching consequences that neither master nor apprentice could have foreseen. Their most challenging assignment came between 41 and 39 BBY, when they were sent to protect Duchess Satine Kryze during Mandalore's civil war. The world's martial traditionalists were fighting against a reformist faction called the New Mandalorians, led by Satine. As she became a target for assassins, the Jedi were assigned to keep her safe. For a full year, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan remained on Mandalore with Satine, constantly on the run from bounty hunters hired to eliminate her. They lived hand to mouth, never certain what the next day would bring. During this extended mission, Obi-Wan developed romantic feelings for the Duchess, something Qui-Gon quickly became aware of. Despite the Jedi prohibition against attachments, Qui-Gon seemed to understand his Padawan's emotions without judgment. Eventually, the Civil War ended with the new Mandalorians coming to power and Satine becoming Mandalore's ruler. Although Obi-Wan would have left the Jedi to stay with her had she asked, Satine never did. Around 41 years before the Battle of Yavin, Qui-Gon decided to take Obi-Wan on what he described as a training exercise. In reality, he was bringing his Padawan to observe the Wookiee celebration of Life Day on Kashyyyk in the village of his old friend Brennan. As they arrived, Qui-Gon advised patience when Obi-Wan expressed confusion about why they were there. This was no ordinary training session. Qui-Gon explained that he wanted Obi-Wan to focus on the energy of Kashyyyk itself, to sense the force flowing through the entire ecosystem. When Brennan spotted Qui-Gon, she embraced him joyfully, then gave the same warm welcome to Obi-Wan. Their reunion was cut short, however. when they learned that another Wookiee named Balfus was missing. Before they could begin searching, Trandoshan hunters attacked the village, using nets to capture Wookiees. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan fought bravely, but Qui-Gon himself was captured when he demanded the hunters surrender. As he was taken away, Qui-Gon told his Padawan that the rescue was now in his hands. Taken to the Trandoshan leader Coruscant, Qui-Gon attempted to negotiate the Wookiees' release. Coruscant, however, wanted to capture Obi-Wan as well. When Kenobi arrived, pretending to surrender, he used the distraction to free Qui-Gon with the Force. Together with the Wookiees who had come to their aid, they forced the outnumbered Trandoshans to surrender and release their prisoners. Returning to the village, they were able to participate in the Life Day celebration as originally planned. Around 40 BBY, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were operating near a planet that served as a base for the Fleshmongers pirate group. Flying their Delta-7 Ether Sprite-class light interceptors, they received a message from Jedi Master Yoda on the planet's surface requesting assistance. Landing, they discovered that Yoda had single-handedly defeated the entire pirate gang to rescue a young Force-sensitive infant named Lo. Yoda asked them to escort the child to the Jedi Temple, assuring Lo that he was in safe hands with Qui-Gon. While Obi-Wan was awestruck that Yoda had taken out an entire room of pirates, Qui-Gon noticed something was troubling the ancient Jedi Master. Yoda explained that he sensed a disturbance in the Force that he felt compelled to investigate. Although Qui-Gon offered to join him, Yoda believed this was a calling only for him and departed alone for the Vargadar system. In 37 BBY, Qui-Gon began experiencing an internal conflict over the Jedi Order's role in the galaxy. He was troubled by how many people, even on Coruscant, viewed the Jedi as warriors and political servants rather than peacekeepers and spiritual guides. The turmoil came to a head during a mission to the planet Breen, where he and Obi-Wan were sent to establish negotiations between Priestess Thur of Wood and the Metal Clan. When the Metal Clan tried to kill both Qui-Gon and the Priestess as an excuse to begin cutting down the planet's trees, Qui-Gon defended Thur and escaped with her to Coruscant. On the capital world, Thur demanded that Qui-Gon act as a warrior and cut down every member of the Metal Clan. When he explained that this was not the Jedi way, she called him a coward who failed to live up to legends of Jedi as great soldiers. This accusation deeply disturbed Qui-Gon, not because she called him a coward, but because she expected him to be a warrior. Seeking answers, Qui-Gon followed the Force to an unnamed world with a dark temple. Inside, he experienced a frightening Force vision where he fought and killed what appeared to be red humanoid beings, only to discover they were actually Jedi. As he cut them down, he saw darkness consuming him, teaching him that unchecked violence would only lead to the dark side. Awaking from his vision, Qui-Gon realized the Force was showing him that balance could be achieved without conflict. He understood that the Jedi needed to find a middle path. They could not give in to the dark side, but neither could they become too rigid in their beliefs. With this new understanding, he returned to Coruscant and helped her find a way forward that didn't require violence. These experiences shaped not just Qui-Gon's approach to the Force, but his relationship with Obi-Wan as well. Through their missions together, from diplomatic negotiations to battlefield rescues, from palace intrigues to pirate confrontations, master and apprentice were forging a bond that would withstand the trials to come. Though they approached the Jedi path differently, their partnership would prove to be one of the most consequential in galactic history. Sometimes, the most important moments in history begin with what seems like a routine assignment. In 32 BBY, the Trade Federation established a blockade around the peaceful planet of Naboo. Officially, they claimed this was a protest against the Republic's taxation of trade routes in outlying star systems. But Qui-Gon Jinn sensed something deeper was at work. Even before the crisis erupted, Qui-Gon had felt a disturbance in the Force. Acting on this intuition, he took Obi-Wan to the Jedi archives to review Senate documents, particularly bills concerning the recent tax reforms. While Obi-Wan grew restless during their research, Qui-Gon explained they were looking for underlying patterns. This wasn't just about taxation, he told his Padawan. It was about control, and there was a lot of control at stake between the planets and corporations involved. When the blockade was established, Supreme Chancellor Valorum decided to send negotiators to resolve the dispute. Not politicians or diplomats, but Jedi. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were dispatched to the Trade Federation command ship, tasked with resolving the situation peacefully. It should have been a straightforward diplomatic mission. Instead, it would set in motion events that would change the galaxy forever. Upon arrival, they were escorted to a conference room and told that Viceroy Newt Gunray would greet them. As they waited, Qui-Gon sensed the fear emanating from the Neimoidian leaders, a clear sign this was no ordinary trade dispute. His suspicions were confirmed when the Federation flooded their conference room with poison gas, attempting to assassinate the Jedi ambassadors. Holding their breath, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan survived until the doors opened, giving them a chance to escape. They fought through battle droids and fled into the ship's ventilation system. Making their way to the hangar, they discovered the Federation's true intention, a full-scale invasion of Naboo. The blockade had merely been the first step in a military takeover. With no time to warn the Republic, the Jedi stowed away on separate landing craft headed to the planet's surface. Their mission had transformed from negotiation to desperate intervention. They needed to warn the Naboo people before it was too late. Once on the surface, Qui-Gon's path through the forests of Naboo led to an unexpected encounter. Rushing through the underbrush to avoid an oncoming troop transport, he ran into a Gungan named Jar Jar Binks. The clumsy native latched onto Qui-Gon in the chaos, and both narrowly avoided being crushed by Federation vehicles. According to Gungan custom, this life-saving act created a life debt between them, binding Jar Jar to Qui-Gon despite the Jedi's attempts to send him away. After reuniting with Obi-Wan, they needed shelter and information. Jar Jar offered to take them to the underwater Gungan city, though he reluctantly admitted he had been exiled and would face punishment for returning. Left with no better options, the Jedi convinced him to guide them anyway. In the magnificent underwater city, they were immediately apprehended and brought before Boss Nass, the Gungan leader. Qui-Gon attempted to warn him about the Trade Federation threat, but generations of mistrust between the Gungans and the surface-dwelling Naboo made Boss Nass indifferent to their plight. Seeing no other way, Qui-Gon used a Jedi mind trick to persuade the Gungan leader to provide them with transportation and allow Jar Jar to guide them through the planet's core to reach Theed, the capital city. Their journey through Naboo's core proved perilous, as their Bongo submarine was pursued by increasingly larger sea monsters, each predator becoming prey to something bigger. Despite these dangers, they reached Theed, only to find it already under Federation control. Moving stealthily through the occupied city, they located Queen Amidala and her retinue as they were being led away by battle droids. In a swift rescue operation, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan freed the Queen, her handmaidens, and several guards. Together, they fought their way to the royal hangar and boarded the Queen's starship. Breaking through the blockade, they escaped into space, but not without sustaining damage to their hyperdrive. Unable to reach Coruscant, they needed to land somewhere for repairs. Qui-Gon suggested Tatooine, a desert planet controlled by the Hutts rather than the Republic or the Trade Federation. Despite objections from Captain Panaka, the Queen's head of security, who worried about the danger the Hutt-controlled world posed, they set course for the remote Outer Rim planet. Upon landing, Qui-Gon decided to venture into the nearest settlement to find the parts they needed. He brought along Jar Jar and, surprisingly, one of the Queen's handmaidens named Padme, who insisted on seeing the planet firsthand. Unknown to Qui-Gon at the time, this wasn't just any handmaiden, but Queen Amidala herself in disguise, with a decoy remaining on the ship. In the spaceport of Mos Espa, they found a junk shop owned by a Toydarian named Watto. The shop had the hyperdrive generator they needed, but Watto wouldn't accept Republic credits. When Qui-Gon attempted to use a Jedi mind trick to persuade him otherwise, he discovered that Toydarians were immune to such mental influence. It was in this unlikely place, surrounded by spare parts and broken droids, that Qui-Gon met a young boy named Anakin Skywalker, a slave who worked in Watto's shop. Something about the child immediately caught Qui-Gon's attention. When a sandstorm forced them to seek shelter, Anakin generously offered his home to the strangers. In the humble slave quarters, Qui-Gon met Anakin's mother, Shmi, and began to sense the boy's extraordinary connection to the Force. Anakin's ability to see things before they happened, his reflexes, and his technical skills all pointed to Force sensitivity. But when Anakin revealed he was building a pod racer in secret and offered to win the parts they needed by racing, Qui-Gon began to realize this child might be special beyond measure. The plan took shape quickly. Qui-Gon made a deal with Watto to enter Anakin in the upcoming Bunta Eve Classic pod race. He convinced the Toydarian that the pod was his own, concealing that Anakin had built it. If Anakin won, Watto would give them the parts they needed. If he lost, Watto would keep their ship. It was a dangerous gamble, but Qui-Gon's faith in the Force and in Anakin was unwavering. While helping Anakin prepare his pod, Qui-Gon took a blood sample from the boy, ostensibly to check for infections. In reality, he sent it to Obi-Wan on the ship to analyze the midi-chlorian count, a measure of Force potential. The results were staggering. Anakin had over 20,000 midi-chlorians per cell, higher than any Jedi on record, including Master Yoda. This revelation, combined with what Shmi told him next, convinced Qui-Gon that he had stumbled upon something momentous. According to Shmi, Anakin had no father. She had conceived him, carried him, and given birth, but there had been no male involvement. It was as if the Force itself had created life within her. For Qui-Gon, who had studied ancient Jedi prophecies despite the Order's dismissal of them, this could only mean one thing. Anakin Skywalker might be the chosen one, a figure foretold to bring balance to the Force. The prophecy, largely forgotten or dismissed by the contemporary Jedi, had stayed with Qui-Gon through the years. Before the race, Qui-Gon approached Watto with another wager. If Anakin won, Watto would free the boy. Watto scoffed at freeing 2 slaves but agreed to 1, leaving it to chance which would be freed. Using the Force to influence the outcome of the toss, Qui-Gon ensured Anakin would be the one released if he won. The Bunta Eve Classic was as dangerous as it was exciting. Pod racing, with its breakneck speeds and deadly courses, claimed lives regularly. Yet against all odds and despite sabotage from rival racers, Anakin emerged victorious. His win secured both the parts needed to repair the Queen's ship and, more importantly, his own freedom. Qui-Gon returned to Watto's shop with the news of Anakin's victory. The Toydarian, having lost everything betting against the boy, reluctantly fulfilled his end of the bargain. Qui-Gon gathered the hyperdrive parts and informed Anakin that he was now free to leave Tatooine. Unfortunately, the deal did not include Shmi's freedom, a fact that weighed heavily on both Anakin and Qui-Gon. After an emotional farewell to his mother, Anakin left with Qui-Gon, who believed the boy should be trained as a Jedi. It was a momentous decision for both of them, one that would have far-reaching consequences neither could foresee. As they made their way back to the ship, an unexpected threat emerged. A figure in black, wielding a red lightsaber, attacked Qui-Gon near the ship's ramp. This was Darth Maul, though Qui-Gon wouldn't learn his name until later. What he did know immediately was that this was no ordinary opponent. For 1,000 years, the Sith had existed only in history and cautionary tales told to Jedi younglings. Their order was thought to have been destroyed a millennium ago. Yet here stood a warrior clearly trained in the dark side of the Force, his skills nearly matching Qui-Gon's own. Their duel was brief but intense. Qui-Gon held his ground against the mysterious attacker, but recognized the danger of prolonging the fight. When the ship lowered its ramp, he made a leap aboard, escaping the Sith Lord's grasp. As they left Tatooine behind, Qui-Gon introduced Anakin to Obi-Wan and reported both the boy's discovery and the encounter with the Dark Warrior to the Jedi Council. His journey had begun as a simple diplomatic mission to Naboo. Now, Qui-Gon found himself carrying 2 pieces of information that would shake the foundations of the Jedi Order: the possible return of their ancient enemies, the Sith, and the discovery of a boy who might be the chosen one destined to restore balance to the Force. The gleaming towers of Coruscant represented everything the Republic stood for: order, civilization, stability. But as Qui-Gon Jinn's ship touched down on the capital world, he carried with him 2 discoveries that would shake that stability to its core. Upon arrival, Qui-Gon wasted no time in requesting an audience with the Jedi Council. In their circular chamber high above the bustling cityscape, he stood before the assembled masters and delivered his report. First, he described his encounter with the mysterious warrior on Tatooine, stating his belief that his attacker was a Sith Lord. The council members exchanged troubled glances. The Sith, ancient enemies of the Jedi, were thought to have been destroyed 1,000 years earlier. Such a claim required extraordinary evidence. But it was Qui-Gon's second revelation that truly tested the council's patience. He informed them that he had discovered a boy with an extraordinarily high midichlorian count, higher even than Master Yoda's. Furthermore, the boy had been conceived without a father, born of a virgin birth. In Qui-Gon's mind, these signs pointed to only one possibility. Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one from Jedi prophecy, destined to bring balance to the Force. The Council, already skeptical about the Sith claim, now regarded Qui-Gon with barely concealed doubt. Nevertheless, they agreed to test the boy's Force sensitivity and aptitude for training. As Anakin stood before them, answering their questions and undergoing their examinations, Qui-Gon waited with uncharacteristic tension. Despite his outward calm, Obi-Wan could sense his master's anxiety. He worried that regardless of the Council's decision, Qui-Gon would find a way to train Anakin anyway. The test results confirmed what Qui-Gon already knew. Anakin was incredibly strong with the Force. But instead of welcoming this potential into their ranks, the Council delivered their verdict. Anakin Skywalker would not be trained as a Jedi. Despite his power, they deemed him too old to begin the training. Jedi typically began their instruction as infants before attachments and emotions could take root. At 9 years old, Anakin was already full of fear, anger, and attachments to his former life, particularly to his mother. Standing before the Council, Qui-Gon did something that surprised even his Padawan. He directly challenged their decision, insisting that Anakin must receive training. When they held firm, he made a bold declaration. He would take Anakin as his own Padawan learner. When reminded that he already had an apprentice in Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon stated that Obi-Wan was ready for the Jedi trials. If his current Padawan became a knight, he would be free to train Anakin. The Council, growing weary of Qui-Gon's defiance, decided to delay further discussion. Queen Amidala was preparing to return to Naboo to confront the Trade Federation, and they ordered Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to accompany her. The fate of Anakin Skywalker would be decided later. As they left the council chamber, Qui-Gon began giving Anakin some preliminary lessons about the Force, clearly intending to begin the boy's training with or without official sanction. Before departing for Naboo, Qui-Gon had a meaningful encounter with his former master, Dooku. The two Jedi met at the temple, where Dooku offered advice to his old apprentice. Neither could have known this would be their final meeting. Eventually, Dooku would leave the Jedi Order following the invasion of his homeworld, Sereno. Eventually, though Qui-Gon would never live to learn this, Dooku would fall to the dark side and become the Sith apprentice of Darth Sidious, the very shadow mastermind behind the Naboo crisis. As he prepared for the return journey to Naboo, Qui-Gon felt a strange sense of foreboding. Nevertheless, he focused on the task at hand. The Queen was determined to liberate her people, and she would need all the protection the Jedi could provide. Upon reaching Naboo, they discovered the situation had worsened. The Trade Federation's occupation was complete, and the Naboo people were suffering. Qui-Gon and the others traveled to the swamps, seeking the Gungan army that might help turn the tide. They found the native species hiding in a sacred area of the forests, having retreated there after the droid armies invaded their cities. It was here that Queen Amidala revealed a stunning truth. The regal figure who had traveled with them to Coruscant was not the real queen, but a decoy. Padme, the handmaiden who had accompanied Qui-Gon to Mos Espa, was in fact Queen Amidala herself. She had maintained this deception as a security measure, allowing her to move more freely while protecting her true identity. Qui-Gon, however, showed no surprise at this revelation. He had seen through her disguise from their first meeting, but had respected her strategy and played along. With her real identity revealed, Amidala pleaded with the Gungans to join forces against the Trade Federation. Boss Nass, impressed by her humility and courage, agreed to an alliance. Together, they formulated a daring plan. The Gungan army would engage the Federation's droid forces in open battle, drawing them away from Theed. Meanwhile, Amidala, her security forces, and the Jedi would infiltrate the capital city to capture Viceroy Gunray. Before they departed, Qui-Gon made one thing clear to the Queen. While he would protect her with his life, he could not fight a war for her. The Jedi were peacekeepers, not soldiers. His role, and Obi-Wan's, was to guard the Queen and deal with any Force-sensitive threats that might arise. Given his earlier encounter with the Sith warrior, Qui-Gon suspected such a confrontation was likely. As predicted, when their small force entered Theed's main hangar, they found Darth Maul waiting for them. The Zabrak Sith apprentice, his face marked with red and black tattoos, ignited his crimson lightsaber. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan stepped forward to face him while Amidala and her forces continued toward the palace throne room. What followed was one of the most intense lightsaber duels the galaxy had seen in generations. Maul was a formidable opponent, skilled in forms of combat the Jedi had not faced in centuries. He wielded a double-bladed lightsaber, a weapon designed to intimidate as much as to kill. Despite being outnumbered, Maul controlled the flow of battle, leading the Jedi out of the hangar and through the power generator complex. Throughout the duel, Qui-Gon maintained the calm focus that had always characterized his fighting style. He relied on the living Force to guide his movements, trusting his instincts over rigid forms. Obi-Wan, younger and more agile, matched his master's rhythm, the two Jedi working in tandem against their common foe. Then came the moment that would change everything. Maul managed to separate the Jedi, knocking Obi-Wan down several levels and activating a series of ray shields that temporarily trapped the Padawan behind an energy barrier. For critical moments, Qui-Gon would face the Sith Lord alone. Throughout these confrontations, Qui-Gon's unique approach to the Jedi way became increasingly apparent. While other Jedi might have hesitated to challenge the Council or to champion an untested prophecy, Qui-Gon followed what he believed was the will of the Force, regardless of institutional skepticism. His compassion extended to all beings, from taking Jar Jar Binks under his protection to fighting for Anakin's future as a Jedi. His independent thinking often put him at odds with the established order, including his own Padawan. Obi-Wan, though devoted to his master, struggled to understand Qui-Gon's willingness to defy the Council. Yet it was precisely this independent spirit that allowed Qui-Gon to recognize what others could not: the return of the Sith and the appearance of the Chosen One. Even as he faced Darth Maul in single combat, Qui-Gon remained true to his principles. He did not fight out of hatred or fear, but out of a duty to protect. He sought not to destroy his opponent, but to defend those who could not defend themselves. In this moment, as in so many throughout his life, Qui-Gon exemplified what it truly meant to be a Jedi Knight. The ray shields that separated Obi-Wan from the duel cycled on and off at regular intervals. Qui-Gon used this enforced pause in their combat to center himself, kneeling in meditation while Maul paced impatiently on the other side of the barrier. This moment of calm before the storm perfectly encapsulated Qui-Gon's character. Even in the midst of mortal danger, he found his center in the Force. When the shields deactivated, the duel resumed with increased intensity. Maul pressed his advantage, drawing on the dark side to fuel his aggression. Qui-Gon, despite his wisdom and experience, found himself gradually giving ground to the younger, more ferocious opponent. The narrow walkways and perilous drops of the generator complex left little room for error. As they fought across catwalks and through the labyrinthine facility, Obi-Wan raced to catch up, watching helplessly as his master engaged the Sith Lord alone. The barriers cycled on and off, alternately allowing him to advance and forcing him to wait. With each deactivation, he sprinted forward, desperate to rejoin the fight before it was too late. This series of confrontations in the heart of Theed would test not only Qui-Gon's lightsaber skills, but the very philosophy that had guided him throughout his life. His belief in the living Force, his commitment to following its will rather than rigid doctrine, his conviction that Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one. All of these would leave an unforgettable mark on the Jedi Order and the galaxy at large. Even as he faced a Sith Lord in combat, even as he defied the Jedi Council's wishes regarding Anakin, Qui-Gon never wavered from his path. His independent thinking and compassionate nature would inspire those who knew him, particularly Obi-Wan Kenobi, who would carry forward his master's legacy in ways neither of them could foresee. Deep within the power generator complex of Theed Palace, a battle was about to unfold that would change the course of galactic history. The red and black tattooed face of Darth Maul, illuminated by his double-bladed lightsaber, stood in stark contrast to the blue and green blades wielded by Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. This wasn't just a fight between three skilled warriors. It was the first confrontation between Jedi and Sith in 1,000 years. Maul's years of training were evident as the duel progressed, eventually leading to the point where Obi-Wan found himself stalled out by the ray shields of the palace. Trapped behind these shields, Obi-Wan could only watch as Qui-Gon faced the Sith Lord alone. The one-on-one confrontation between Qui-Gon and Maul was evenly matched at first. Qui-Gon's decades of experience and deep connection to the Force compensated for Maul's youth and aggression. The Jedi Master relied on his preferred form, Ataru, a lightsaber style characterized by acrobatic maneuvers and powerful strikes. But Ataru demanded energy, and Qui-Gon was no longer young. As the duel progressed, fatigue began to take its toll. Towards the end of the duel, Qui-Gon made his way through the ray shields and resumed the attack, pressing forward with renewed determination. But Maul had been studying his opponent, identifying weaknesses in the Jedi's defense. As their lightsabers clashed in a flurry of strikes and parries, Maul executed a move Qui-Gon wasn't prepared for. The Sith Lord countered with a physical strike from his lightsaber hilt, catching Qui-Gon off balance. In that split second of vulnerability, Maul thrust his crimson blade forward, impaling Qui-Gon through the torso. The Jedi Master's eyes widened in shock and pain as the energy blade burned through vital organs. Behind the final ray shield, Obi-Wan watched in horror, unable to intervene as his master fell. When the shield finally deactivated, Obi-Wan charged forward with a fury he had never before experienced. Grief for his fallen master mixed with anger toward his killer, pushing the young Jedi to fight with an intensity that surprised even Maul. The Sith Lord found himself on the defensive against Obi-Wan's onslaught. But raw emotion alone wasn't enough against Maul's refined combat skills. The Sith regained his footing and counterattacked, forcing Obi-Wan back. With a powerful strike, Maul knocked Obi-Wan's lightsaber from his hand, sending the weapon clattering into the depths below. Another kick sent the Padawan himself tumbling over the edge of the pit, though he managed to grab onto a small protrusion to avoid falling to his death. Maul stood above him, savoring his apparent victory, scraping his lightsaber along the edge of the pit to shower sparks down on his helpless opponent. But in that moment of arrogance, he made a fatal mistake. He underestimated the power of a Jedi's connection to the Force. Gathering his focus despite his precarious position, Obi-Wan reached out through the Force, calling his master's fallen lightsaber to his hand. In one fluid motion, he propelled himself upward, flipping over Maul's head while igniting Qui-Gon's blade. Before the Sith Lord could react, Obi-Wan slashed horizontally, cutting Maul in half at the waist. The Sith's expression shifted from triumph to shock as he fell backward into the reactor shaft, his body separating as he tumbled into the abyss. Despite this victory, Obi-Wan had no time to celebrate. He rushed to Qui-Gon's side, cradling his dying master in his arms. These final moments between them would echo through the decades to come, shaping not just Obi-Wan's life but the fate of the galaxy itself. With his remaining strength, Qui-Gon reached up to touch his Padawan's face. His voice weak but clear, he made Obi-Wan promise to train Anakin Skywalker. Even in death, Qui-Gon remained steadfast in his belief that Anakin was the chosen one who would bring balance to the Force. This wasn't merely a request, it was a sacred charge, passing the responsibility for the boy's future from master to apprentice. Obi-Wan, overcome with grief yet bound by duty, gave his word he would train Anakin, regardless of the Council's previous objections. With this promise secured, Qui-Gon Jinn, Jedi Master and Maverick, released his final breath and became one with the Force. In the aftermath of the battle, as Naboo celebrated their liberation from the Trade Federation, preparations were made to honor the fallen Jedi. Qui-Gon was given a traditional Jedi funeral, his body placed upon a ceremonial pyre, as was customary for those who had served the Order with distinction. The funeral took place at night, the flames from the pyre illuminating the solemn faces of those gathered to pay their respects. Queen Amidala stood in her formal regalia, her face a mask of dignity despite her sorrow. The Jedi Council members were present, including Masters Yoda and Windu, who had come from Coruscant to honor their fallen comrade despite their past disagreements with him. Newly elected Supreme Chancellor Palpatine also attended, though none present could know that he was in fact Darth Sidious, the very Sith Master who had orchestrated the entire Naboo crisis. Notably absent from the funeral were two significant figures: Qui-Gon's former Master Dooku and Jedi Master Yaddle. Unknown to the other mourners, Yaddle had followed Dooku to Coruscant, suspicious of his intended absence. There she witnessed his confrontation with Darth Sidious, a meeting that would have profound implications for the future. As the flames consumed Qui-Gon's mortal remains, Obi-Wan stood beside young Anakin Skywalker. The boy's future had been uncertain until that moment, but now Obi-Wan revealed life-changing news. The Council had granted him permission to train Anakin as a Jedi. Whether they had been moved by Qui-Gon's sacrifice or by Obi-Wan's defeat of a Sith Lord, the Council had reversed their earlier decision. With quiet determination, Obi-Wan promised Anakin that he would become a Jedi. In that moment, standing before his master's funeral pyre, Obi-Wan Kenobi took his first step into a larger world, accepting both the rank of Jedi Knight and the responsibility of training the boy who might be the chosen one. Qui-Gon's death reverberated throughout the Jedi Order. Despite his history of disagreeing with the Council, he was remembered as a great Jedi whose insights and courage had revealed the return of their ancient enemies. His loss was felt keenly by those who had known him, from his old friend Yoda to the Wookiees of Kashyyyk. For the people of Naboo, Qui-Gon became a hero, honored for giving his life in their defense. They built a shrine to his memory that would remain popular for years to come. Even those who had never met him, like Senator Bail Organa, would later learn of his sacrifice and the critical role he played in protecting Naboo during its darkest hour. The most immediate and tangible outcome of Qui-Gon's passing was Obi-Wan's promotion to the rank of Jedi Knight. Having proven himself in combat against a Sith Lord, the Council recognized that he had effectively passed the Jedi trials through his actions. This elevation in status allowed him to take Anakin as his Padawan, fulfilling his promise to his dying master. Yet even as the visible consequences of the duel played out, unseen machinations continued in the shadows. Darth Sidious, though momentarily set back by the loss of his apprentice, simply adjusted his plans. Maul would be replaced, and the grand design would proceed. The Sith had revealed themselves after a millennium of hiding, but the Jedi had glimpsed only the apprentice, not the master who pulled the strings. Qui-Gon Jinn had lived as a maverick, often at odds with Jedi tradition. In death, his influence continued to shape events in ways no one could have predicted. His discovery of Anakin Skywalker, his confrontation with Darth Maul, and his final request to Obi-Wan set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately determine the fate of the Jedi Order and the balance of the Force itself. Death is not the end. This truth, known to few in the galaxy, was something Qui-Gon Jinn had begun to discover long before his fateful encounter with Darth Maul. Throughout his life, Qui-Gon had been drawn to aspects of the Force that other Jedi overlooked or dismissed. His interest in ancient prophecies was just the beginning of a spiritual journey that would ultimately transcend mortality itself. Before his final mission to Naboo, Qui-Gon had traveled to a world shrouded in mystery, a planet so strong with the Force that legends claimed it was the birthplace of life and the origin of midi-chlorians. There he encountered 5 enigmatic beings known as the Force Priestesses, who had achieved what seemed impossible. They had retained their conscious identity after physical death. From these priestesses, Qui-Gon learned a fundamental truth about the Force that had been forgotten or overlooked by the Jedi Order. The Force existed in 2 aspects that worked in tandem. The living Force, created by all living things in the present moment, and the cosmic Force, the greater energy field that bound the galaxy together. When living beings died, their life energy passed from the living Force into the cosmic Force, becoming one with the greater whole. But the priestesses revealed something more. Because these 2 aspects of the Force existed in tandem, it was possible for one who was strong in the Force and possessed the right knowledge to retain their consciousness after death. The priestesses deemed Qui-Gon worthy of this knowledge, and he secretly began his training to unlock its mysteries. Qui-Gon also sought wisdom from a shaman of the wills who taught him that achieving eternal consciousness required absolute selflessness. One could not cling to their identity out of fear or desire for power. Only by completely surrendering to the Force could one paradoxically maintain their individual awareness within it. Tragically, Qui-Gon's training remained incomplete at the time of his death on Naboo. Yet even this did not prevent him from finding a way to reach back into the world of the living. Though he could not manifest physically as a Force spirit, he discovered how to communicate as a disembodied voice to those sensitive enough to hear him. 10 years after the events on Naboo, Qui-Gon made his first known attempt to reach across this divide. Anakin Skywalker, now a Jedi Padawan under Obi-Wan's tutelage, had returned to Tatooine after experiencing recurring nightmares about his mother. He found Shmi had been kidnapped by Tusken raiders, and when she died in his arms, Anakin snapped. Consumed by rage and grief, he slaughtered the entire Tusken camp. Feeling the great disturbance this created in the Force, Qui-Gon called out to Anakin, begging him to listen to his better nature and refuse to give in to his hatred. Even Yoda, meditating on Coruscant, could hear Qui-Gon's voice, though he couldn't understand what was happening. Sadly, Anakin was too lost in his anger to heed the warning. Later, he would tell himself he had only imagined Qui-Gon's presence, unwilling to face what this moment revealed about his character. Shortly after this incident, as the galaxy descended into the Clone Wars, Anakin visited Qui-Gon's shrine on Naboo. In partial repentance for ignoring Qui-Gon's words during his rage against the Tusken raiders, Anakin attempted to connect with him again. Though he sensed nothing, he felt a sudden calm despite the looming conflict, which he chose to interpret as Qui-Gon's way of telling him things could be made right. It was not until the waning days of the Clone Wars that Qui-Gon made another significant contact with the living world. This time, he reached out to Yoda, knowing the ancient Jedi Master was destined to play a crucial role in bringing balance to the Force. Qui-Gon guided Yoda to Dagobah, a planet strong with the living Force, as the first step in a series of trials. When Yoda first heard Qui-Gon's voice, he could scarcely believe it. By all Jedi teaching, death was final, with no return. But Qui-Gon explained how he had maintained his consciousness through the living Force, though his training had been incomplete. Under Qui-Gon's guidance, Yoda traveled from Dagobah to the homeworld of the Force priestesses, where he underwent tests to determine if he was worthy of learning the secret of eternal consciousness. Yoda passed these trials, and the priestesses instructed that Qui-Gon would guide his further training. This new knowledge would prove vital in the dark times to come, offering a glimmer of hope that the Jedi way would not be completely extinguished, even as the Republic fell and the Empire rose. During the Clone Wars, another strange encounter took place on the mysterious planet Mortis. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and his Padawan Ahsoka Tano were drawn there by three powerful beings who believed Anakin was the Chosen One. On this Force-rich world, Qui-Gon appeared first to Obi-Wan, warning him that the beings sought Anakin and his potential as the Chosen One for their own purposes. When Obi-Wan questioned how such an appearance was possible, Qui-Gon explained that Mortis acted as an amplifier and conduit through which the Force flowed. The two spoke about Anakin's growing power and struggle for balance. Later, Qui-Gon also appeared to Anakin himself, reaffirming his belief that the young Jedi would bring balance to the Force after facing his demons. Although Obi-Wan and Anakin later reported to the Jedi Council that these appearances were likely illusions created by the beings on Mortis, They had truly encountered Qui-Gon's consciousness. The experience further tested the prophecy of the Chosen One, with the father of Mortis ultimately declaring his belief in Anakin's destiny before the Jedi escaped the strange realm. After the fall of the Republic and the Jedi Order, Qui-Gon continued his efforts to reach the living. Before going into exile on Dagobah, Yoda told Obi-Wan that Qui-Gon had returned from the netherworld of the Force and could guide him in learning the same secret of immortality. Yet, despite occasional whispers and sensations, Obi-Wan struggled to make contact with his former master. During his exile on Tatooine, where he watched over Anakin's son Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan often spoke to Qui-Gon, but feared his master would never fully appear to him. The truth was that Qui-Gon was always present, but Obi-Wan was not emotionally ready to see him due to his guilt over Anakin's fall to the dark side. In 16 BBY, when Luke was just 3 years old, Qui-Gon's voice warned Obi-Wan to protect the boy from bandits attacking the Lars homestead. Years later, in 9 BBY, after Obi-Wan had confronted Darth Vader again and finally come to terms with Anakin's fall, Qui-Gon at last appeared visibly to his former Padawan as he rode toward Beggar's Canyon. This reunion brought both joy and understanding. Qui-Gon told Obi-Wan that he had always been there, but Obi-Wan had not been ready to see him until that moment. From then on, their connection grew stronger, with Qui-Gon providing guidance and companionship during Obi-Wan's lonely years in the desert. When Kenobi faced the Wookiee bounty hunter Coruscant, he called upon his master to give him strength. In his final years, Obi-Wan completed the training Qui-Gon had begun, learning how to retain his consciousness after death. When he sacrificed himself aboard the Death Star, allowing Darth Vader to strike him down so Luke could escape, Obi-Wan became one with the Force but maintained his identity just as Qui-Gon had taught him. Yoda, too, had mastered this technique during his exile. When he died shortly after Luke Skywalker returned to Dagobah, he passed peacefully into the Force, retaining his consciousness as Qui-Gon had shown was possible. These techniques, first discovered by Qui-Gon, would prove crucial in guiding Luke Skywalker toward his destiny of confronting Vader and the Emperor. The greatest vindication of Qui-Gon's belief in Anakin as the Chosen One came when Darth Vader finally turned against Emperor Palpatine to save his son Luke. By killing the Emperor and sacrificing himself, Anakin fulfilled the prophecy, bringing balance to the Force and destroying the Sith. In his final moments, Anakin too found redemption and the path to retaining his consciousness in the Force. Qui-Gon's influence extended even to those who never knew him in life. Luke Skywalker, in his quest to rediscover the Jedi Order's forgotten history, learned about Qui-Gon's life, his relationship with Obi-Wan, and the critical role he played in the Skywalker family's destiny. Though not related by blood, Qui-Gon's deep connection to the family's history with the Jedi led Luke to consider him part of the Skywalker legacy. Decades later, during the climactic Battle of Exegol in 35 ABY, a young Jedi named Rey faced the resurrected Emperor Palpatine. In her moment of greatest need, she heard the voices of Jedi past supporting her. Among them was Qui-Gon Jinn, telling her that every Jedi who ever lived continued to exist within her, standing behind her as she rose to confront the darkness. This is perhaps Qui-Gon's greatest legacy, the understanding that death is not truly the end, that the Force connects all living things across time and space, and that those who have passed on remain with us, guiding and supporting new generations. His belief in the living force, his trust in following its will rather than rigid doctrine, and his discovery of consciousness beyond death transformed the very nature of what it meant to be a Jedi. The maverick, who often stood alone against the Jedi Council, ultimately preserved the knowledge and wisdom of the Jedi through the darkest period in galactic history. The man who recognized the Chosen One ensured that prophecy would be fulfilled, even though he did not live to see it. And the Master who taught Obi-Wan Kenobi continued that teaching relationship long after his physical form had joined with the Force. In life, Qui-Gon Jinn followed his own path, guided by his connection to the living Force. In death, he transcended the boundaries between life and afterlife, continuing to shape events and guide those who would listen. His journey did not end on Naboo, but continued through the decades that followed, touching lives and influencing destinies in ways that even he could not have foreseen. Through his discoveries, his teachings, and his enduring presence, Qui-Gon Jinn achieved a form of immortality more real and meaningful than any Sith Lord's quest for eternal life could ever hope to attain.